Over the past 4 years, we, the people, have seen the consequences of bad choices in our elected leaders. We have watched the per-person debt on this island more than double, and we watched as Adelup pushed Guam to the edge of the financial cliff, right behind Puerto Rico. In 2016, we elected a bunch of new senators that stopped Adelup from pushing Guam over the cliff behind Puerto Rico. And now we get a chance to make a change in Adelup. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ken Leon Guerrero, the spokesperson for Guam Citizens for Public Accountability. And for the past 4 years, I have been engaging with Adelup in the legislature and different departments of government of Guam, fighting for the people of Guam. And now as we get ready to go into the 2018 elections, based on an analysis of the personalities, the teams, the platforms, here are our recommendations for Adelup. Starting with the Republican side of the platform. And I have to admit, like so many of you, I was thoroughly disappointed that this was the only team the Republican Party put forward. It seems that the Republican Party has a very dim view of Republicans on this island. They think that Republicans are like robots or zombies that will do the bidding of their lords and masters, the heads of the Republican Party, without question. Well, I'm here to say, thankfully here to say, that is not true. There are a great many good Republicans on this island. I tried to get some of them to run, but they all felt that without the backing of the Republican Party, it would be an exercise in futility. That's why we need to look very closely at what the Republican Party considers to be the best and brightest. And I give you Tenorio Ada. Now the Tenorio Ada team right off the bat jumped out with their incredible College for All for Nothing program, starting with a pork barrel project there's no way they could deliver on. And then we have the infamous 2014 smash and grab at the public treasury, led by none other than the top of the ticket, Ray Tenorio himself. Ray Tenorio called the legislature into special session and ramrodded through a bill to give him, the governor, the senators, and their select followers massive retroactive pay raises at our expense. In fact, that pay raise was one of the things that pushed Guam into the dangerous financial situation we're in right now. And in an utter act of contempt, they rammed this through less than 3 weeks after they won their second term. That shows the contempt that Tenorio and Calvo have for the Guam voters. And I have to ask, why would they put somebody forward that is apparently as ignorant or dumb as Ray Tenorio? He had to know that these pay raises were going to come out and that he would be tagged with it. I don't understand why Calvo didn't push the pay raises through, because he was term limited. He had nothing left to gain and nothing to lose, whereas Ray Tenorio had everything to lose. And the fact that Ray Tenorio pushed that pay raise through shows me that he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. And at the current situation we have facing government of Guam, the last thing we need is to have a dull fork in Adelup. And part of the reason why Tenorio did it is he's so proud of saying he's a loyal soldier. Even the governor admits that Tenorio's a loyal soldier. He's so loyal that he picked the most expensive health insurance program, which benefited the governor's family and cost taxpayers $21 million. He's so loyal that he gave the politically well-connected insiders, including the governor's family, a $30 million bonus over and above the price for the land of Legion. And what's really irritating about this, the Calvo Tenorio administration spent 4 years and millions of taxpayer dollars fighting against the district court order to pay taxes on time. But when this order came up, Tenorio didn't even hesitate. He couldn't sign the agreement fast enough to give millions of dollars to well-connected political insiders. And then on top of that, we have the curious case of Godfather-like behavior as businesses are being encouraged to donate money to the Tenorio Political Action Committee in exchange for contracts or keeping contracts, as we see with the DOC situation. And then, if that wasn't enough, the Glock party. Here, the governor, lieutenant governor, pardon me, pulls a gun away from an officer in such a manner that he could have wounded or killed the officer or bystanders, and he dances away scot-free. That's not the kind of people we want leading our island up in Adelup. The Republicans should be ashamed that they had such a low opinion of the taxpayers and voters on Guam that they would put forward Tenorio Ada as the best possible Republican team to run this island. So, for those of you voting on the Republican side of the ticket, the answer is obvious. Just say no. Don't even give them the courtesy of a vote. Let the empty ballots speak volumes to the leaders of the Republican Party that we are not going to vote for your blessed and appointed leaders unless you take the people into consideration and give us quality candidates to choose from. Now, let's take a look at the Democratic Party, starting with the in team, with Lou and Josh. Now, I am not in favor of this team because it's a repeat of the Calvo Tenorio team, because here, once again, we have a big business that thinks they're going to run government of Guam like a business. Well, we saw how that worked under Calvo Tenorio, and we don't need a repeat. And the reason is government is not a business. Government is government. Business, the role of business is to make profit. The role of government is to provide service. And it is not going to be in the best interest of the people of Guam to have another person using the government of Guam as a business opportunity for the family business. And you have to ask yourself, why would they even do it? I mean, here we have a person who runs a billion-dollar corporation and she goes on a leave of absence. Well, that's not stepping away from the business.
These aren't people. These are animals.
Don't be rude. No, I'm not going to give you a question. You are fake news.
What comes out of Donald Trump's mouth is, for a president of the United States, unprecedented.
Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news.
So is what goes into his wallet. More than $500 million of income last year for Trump and his family, from their hotels, golf courses, clubs, merchandise sales, from old businesses and newly formed ones. No modern president has profited this way during his time in office. Predecessors like Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush put their assets in blind trust to avoid conflicts between their financial interests and the public interest. Trump did not. He announced last January he'd step away from his businesses, but only from their management, not their profits.
My two sons are going to be running the company.
As president, he's promoted them with his presence relentlessly. During his first 514 days in office, he visited Trump properties on 159 of them. The stars have all aligned, his son Eric said last year. I think our brand is the hottest it's ever been.
Just like we've seen with the Trump family running government, the United States government, as a business opportunity for their family, I'm concerned that we might see the same thing happening in a Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration, because there are so many well-connected political insiders flocking to the banner of the Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration. It reminds me of vultures getting ready to feed, because every one of these political insiders are only supporting the candidates in return for something. They're all expecting something. They all want their bite, or their piece of the pie, so to speak. So when I see this many well-connected political insiders driving a campaign like this, I know that they are only going to fatten their own pockets at the expense of the public. We've been through that with the Calvo Tenorio team. We cannot afford a repeat. There's a lot of pork barrels still open that haven't been closed by the Calvo Tenorio administration. And my concern is that the in team of vultures would look at these opportunities with fresh eyes and find ways that they could stymie the efforts of the public to stop the pork barrel raiding and feast themselves. GRP is still in court. God knows why. I mean, I've looked at 3,000 pages of documents going all the way back to 1982, and there is no reason why this case should still be in court. Then we have Guam YTK, another $20 million money-for-nothing pork barrel scam that's still alive in the courts. And my fear is that if the Leon Guerrero Tenorio team get into power, they're going to find ways to keep those moving and get their cut. Manhita Farms is still alive and kicking. That's another potential raid on CLTC property that might be supported by a Leon Guerrero Tenorio team with the proper inducement. Another concern I have right now is that Bank of Guam is in the process of purchasing ASC Trust, Guam's largest private retirement business company. How long will it be before we start seeing actions by a Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration to transfer the assets of the government of Guam retirement system over to ASC Trust? And then there's Guam Memorial. For those of you who weren't aware of it, I have been actively trying to get Guam Memorial Hospital put into federal receivership. We saw what happened at the landfill before the receiver took over. It was used as a piggy bank, an ATM machine, if you will, for politically well-connected insiders who are harvesting millions of dollars off landfill operations. Well, we learned through the testimony on GMH, through the whistleblowers, the same thing is happening at GMH. And my concern is that while I've been pushing for a receiver, Lou Leon Guerrero has been adamant that we should not put a receiver in, that she should control Guam Memorial Hospital when she gets into office. But when I look at her plan is basically the same thing that has happened for the past 30 years. So there is no change in direction there. We need to have a receiver running Guam Memorial Hospital if the island's only public hospital is ever to survive, and the Leon Guerrero Tenorio team will fight it. So she talks often about how she is a strong supporter of Guam Memorial Hospital, and yet when Guam Memorial Hospital needed a bridge loan to build a brand new state-of-the-art labor and delivery room to benefit the 2,000 to 3,000 women and children that use those facilities every year, she refused to loan the money. She says receivership is not a solution. I think she's looking at the opportunity to run the hospital like an ATM machine the way previous administrations did and did at Ordot Dump. The final evidence we need that there will be two classes of people under a Leon Guerrero Tenorio administration is the arrest of Josh Tenorio's sister. And she was arrested for threatening to murder a government witness, and she was released with a traffic ticket. If that isn't two different levels of justice, one for politically well-connected people, one for the rest of us, I don't know what is. So when it comes to the end team, just say no. The people of Guam can't afford a repeat of the Calvo Tenorio experience. Which brings us to the Rodriguez-Cruz team. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the Rodriguez-Cruz team has gotten off to a bad start, a really bad start, because when Dennis Rodriguez confirmed he was running for Adelup, he was going to do it to build on the great legacy of the Calvo Tenorio administration. And it's not surprising he would say that, because he was basically their point man in the legislature for the past 8 years. All the bills that I fought hard against with the administration, Dennis Rodriguez was on the other side pushing back, supporting the administration. Attempts to borrow hundreds of millions of dollars multiple times, and he was one of their strongest supporters. So that wasn't a good one right off the bat. Then the second thing was this ethical challenge. When I say ethical challenge, they got into a little bit of controversy when his running mate refused to resign to run for office. Now that was a big red flag for me, because here we are paying a government employee to run for another office. That didn't sit well with me or a lot of other people. And eventually he did resign his position, but not without making a lot of noise about it. So again, we're looking at ethical challenges. And then there's the tax question that we have to deal with. Dennis Rodriguez represented his father before the island's chief tax officer, Governor Calvo. And this is what the Attorney General had to say about that.
According to a motion to withdraw filed in the District Court of Guam, Dennis Rodriguez Sr. and his wife, Asuncion Rodriguez, did not file their tax returns for the years 1996 through 2001, and thus they owe over $950,000 without including interest and penalties. With interest and penalties included, the amount owed to GovGuam is about $2.7 million. The Rodriguezes entered into settlement negotiations with GovGuam earlier this year. GovGuam had a pending motion to foreclose on the liens it held on some of their properties. The motion states that the Rodriguezes have admitted that they earn $120,000 annually. They drive a Lexus SUV, and they own at least 5 parcels of real property. GovGuam postponed their foreclosure at the request of the Rodriguez's legal counsel so that he could submit additional briefing. The motion goes on to state that the Rodriguez's attorney, Tom Fisher, contacted Arthur Clark, who was an attorney and chief policy advisor to the governor, to inquire about the settlement without the Office of the Attorney General's knowledge and consent. Fisher was the attorney for the Calvo Tenorio campaign. Then on April 7th of 2012, Clark appeared at a settlement negotiation. The motion states that Clark took over settlement negotiations on behalf of GovGuam. The AG states Mr. Clark persists in a course of action that the Office of the Attorney General finds legally inadvisable and antithetical to the public interest. It goes on to state that the only issue remaining in the case is the defendant's counterclaim to foreclose on the Rodriguez's property. However, the AG's office believes it would not be acting in the public interest to settle the case in the manner proposed by Mr. Clark. The Attorney General believes it is in the public interest for DRT to collect as much of the plaintiff's tax debt as is reasonably possible. Because of this disagreement, the AG's office filed this motion to withdraw from the case, saying, quote, "The Office of the Attorney General finds the proposed settlement by Mr. Clark repugnant and fundamentally disagrees with the settlement proposal." The AG's office also states that they met with the governor on Friday, September the 7th of 2012 to discuss the matter, but the Office of the Attorney General and the Office of the Governor have reached no agreement as to how this case should be resolved.
Now, I know that Dennis Rodriguez Sr. is under no obligation to disclose the settlement he made, but unfortunately, that settlement in this environment where well-connected political insiders like mid-pack distributors are skating on paying their taxes, which is forcing the government to increase the taxes on the rest of us, that is an integrity issue that cannot be ignored. And when you couple that with the fact that Dennis Rodriguez was one of the biggest defenders of the pay raises, when Frank Uggan introduced Bill 204 at the end of the 33rd Legislature to roll back the pay raises, as you can see here, Dennis was a staunch no. And during the 33rd Legislature, there were 10 different bills and votes to roll back the pay raises and various bills, and Dennis was on the opposite side of every one of those attempts to roll back pay raises. The only time he changed his vote was after he declared that he was running for governor. So, credibility issues, loyalty to the Calvo Tenorio team, another reason why I think citizens should just say no. And then there's Guam Memorial Hospital. Under the past 8 years, he's been chairman of the Health Committee, and now Guam Memorial Hospital has lost our joint accreditation, and we're on the verge of losing CMS under his watch. So the people of Guam cannot afford to have a governor with this level of challenge to his credibility and his ability running the island's highest office. And then there are other reasons why, because he's also been a staunch supporter of the GRRP deal that could cost taxpayers between $20 and $350 million, and he has been supporting it, and we can't afford to have someone in there supporting that level of pork barrel plunder. There are too many backroom deals still alive in the Calvo Tenorio administration. We have to be careful who we elect. And the last thing we need to do is elect somebody who wants to build on the Calvo Tenorio legacy. So when it comes to the Rodriguez-Cruz team, pass. It'll be for the benefit of the people of Guam. That brings us to the Gutierrez-Bordallo team. Didn't know Carl until I met him a few months ago. I've been following him on the debates and the conversations, and frankly, I haven't heard any new ideas out of him. All of his ideas for solutions to the problems begin with, when I was governor. Well, I got news for you. Times have changed. The situation has changed. When you were governor, everybody had a fax machine. Today, nobody has a fax machine. So on that basis alone, I would be tempted to say that former Governor Gutierrez needs to remain former Governor Gutierrez. But the other thing that I learned out on the campaign trail, when I talked to people, they fell into one of two categories. They either loved him or they feared him. And the people who feared him, and there were a lot of them, would share stories why they feared another Gutierrez administration. And people who loved him, when I asked them, what was the most significant thing that occurred during the Gutierrez administration, they would all tell me without fail some variation of this story. He put a street light in front of my house. He paved the road in front of my driveway. And I've had people come up and tell me, you know, when Carl is governor, if you see him driving down the road, you can stop him and you can tell him, Governor, there's a pothole in front of my house, and he will have somebody there to fix it the next day. To me, that's Santa Claus politics, personality politics, and Guam is at a critical point where we cannot afford that type of politics any longer. Nor can we have a leader who inspires fear in so many of our population. The cult of personality is over. It's time for us to move on. Two weeks after the Calvo Tenorio administration won their second term, they pushed through a massive retroactive pay raise. When Frank Uggan found out about it, he introduced a bill to roll those raises back. And as we saw earlier, it failed. But at least he did something. He tried. And over the next 2 years of the 33rd legislature, he tried several times to roll back the pay raises, only to be stopped by the Adelup and Adelup's supporters in the legislature, which also included Dennis, Tina Munoz Barnes, Rory Respicio. I bring those names up because we're going to see some of them in the senatorial races. But Frank persisted, and finally, in the first months of the 34th legislature, he succeeded in rolling back the pay raises. But that wasn't the only thing he has done for the people. He has fought GRRP. I couldn't get Tom Atta to hold an oversight hearing on GRRP, a group of well-connected political insiders raiding the taxpayers for the tune of up to $20 million. Couldn't get Tom Atta to address the issue at all. Frank Uggan stood up to GRRP, got the Attorney General involved, and we hope that their combined efforts will put GRRP to bed once and for all. Frank Uggan stood up for the people on the list of Chamorro Land Trust when he discovered that the members of the Chamorro Land Trust administration were taking property for themselves. He stood up and fought against political corruption at that level. Looking at GMH, he is in favor of bringing in a receiver or a competent organization outside of Guam politics to handle Guam Memorial Hospital. He's the only one that is recommending a path that would lead to solving all the problems at Guam Memorial Hospital. So when we look at the current budget debate that's been going on, early on, Frank Uggan introduced bills that would allow the governor to reprioritize the government and reorganize the government. The fact that Governor Calvo hasn't used them is another story. When we look at all the candidates running for governor, there is only one candidate that has a track record of standing up for the people of Guam on all these vital and issues, and his attitude is best summed up in this.
You know, I also find myself in a slight quandary, because whether it's increasing taxes for 1 day or 1 year or indefinitely, you know who's actually keeping this government operating? It's the good taxpayers. the individuals and the businesses that actually meet their obligations and pay their taxes on time. We shouldn't be penalizing them by saying we're going to take more of your hard-earned money from the taxpayers and say we're going to continue the operations of this government. Instead, Madam Speaker, we should be talking about imposing and collecting on penalties and interest rather than an amnesty. Yeah, we reflect on the $33 million that's going to be collected, but how much did this government, because these taxpayers did not meet their obligations on time, how much does this government have to forego because it did not take the initiative to aggressively pursue collection of those taxes? That's one question we have to ask ourselves. We should really be talking about suspending business licenses. If you don't pay your taxes on time, you should not have an opportunity to be able to continue to conduct business. We know of a business that recently was announced publicly that owes this government $14.7 million. And that's reflective of 3 calendar years of outstanding tax receivables from that one business. Madam Vice Speaker, that business had no reason to be operating if they were not meeting their tax obligations. And I had an older gentleman that came up to me about paying his real estate taxes. And he said that he approached an individual at Revenue Tax and asked if by any chance he could work out an arrangement. And Madam Vice Speaker, that individual was instructed or asked or encouraged and urged to meet that obligation, even though it was a small amount. But this individual was asking for additional consideration. And this individual is not a business person. Retired individual living on a fixed income. So if we're forcing good taxpayers to continue to run and operate this government, Madam Speaker, whether it's 1 day or 1 year, we should not be asking them to pay more. We should be going after collecting what is due and imposing the penalties and the interest and taking it one step further and prosecuting these individuals so that we don't have to put the stress and the undue burden on all of these other individuals who are keeping this government in operation. So, Madam Speaker, I certainly, like I said a little earlier, have some concern about this because I don't think we should be imposing any additional taxes on our good paid citizens out there who pay their taxes on time. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
For that reason, Guam Citizens for Public Accountability is recommending that everybody out there who's registered to vote and votes on the Democratic side of the ticket vote for Frank Uggan for governor. Next week we will be releasing our recommendations for the Legislature, the Attorney General's Office, the Office for Public Accountability, and for the Congressional Delegate.